everyone. Today you need to have your workbook page. We're going to compare and order fractions. That is page 301 of your lesson pages. You can see it right here on the screen. Make sure you have the same page. All right. So before we start, let's review what a whole is, because if you look here, we need to find out the names for one, and what they mean is one whole. So if I have a cookie, let me make this small. If I have a cookie and I want to divide it into 4 pieces so each of you gets one, and I label these 1/4 for each piece, okay? So I give this one to Pete, this one to Eli, this one to Laura, and this one to Cassidy. That would be 4 pieces out of the 4 were given away, and that equals one whole cookie. The same would be if I have a cookie and I divided it into 3s. Let me just mark those here. Okay, and all 3 of them were used. Then what that means is 3 pieces out of the 3 were used or selected or eaten. Okay, and that would be one whole was eaten or used or selected. Okay, so now let's take a look at our page at the top again. So it has 1 equals 2/2, 3/3, 4/4, 5/5, 6/6, 7/7, 8/8, 9/9, or 10/10. Okay, what do you notice about those? What have we been talking about? Well, for it to be a whole is represented by the same top number as the bottom number. So even if I have 100 million on the top number, that means my bottom number has to have 100 million in order for it to be a whole. Okay, we're not going to talk about this next part over here yet. Let's just do this. Okay, so knowing what we know now about how a whole is represented, look at your work page. We're going to do number 1, and the directions say draw a circle around the fractions that are names for 1. So pause the video and circle the ones that are names for 1, and we'll check our answers. All right, well, you should have circled 7/7 and 12/12 because the number is the same on the top as the bottom, and that stands for a whole. So knowing, let's go over here. We're going to talk about names for a half. Let's go right there. All right, so names for 1/2. Okay, well, if a whole of 4/4, a whole is 4/4, what do you think a half of the fourths would be? It's still 4 pieces, but it would be half of the whole, so that would be 2/4. Okay, let me draw that for you. So I have my circle. I cut it into fourths. A whole would be all of the fourths, right? 4 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4. But a half of the whole, try not to erase it all here for you. A half of the whole is 2 parts out of the 4. See that? Okay. Or we can put it side by side. The whole, let's do a different number. Let's do 6 6 is a whole. Let's do a half. Half of 6 6 would be 3 6. Because 3 is half of the 6 pieces available. We still need to keep this number the same because it's still the same number of available pieces. All right, let's try one more. Whoops, where's my eraser? Okay. Let's do eighths. 1 whole is 8 eighths. Okay. Half of 1 whole would be what? Well, there's still 8 available pieces. So half of that, half of this 8 right here would be 4. 4 eighths is half. Well, let's draw it and make sure. I have to make it big enough that I can make eighths. Okay. Okay, I have eighths here. And let's fill in 4 eighths. 1, 2, 3, 4. Is that half? Well, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 left. So, yes, the 4 that I filled in is half. So, that is how that works. So, let's go back to number 1. Now they want us to draw a triangle around the fractions that are names for 1/2. So basically you look at the bottom number and then you look at the top number. If the top number is half of the bottom number, then it's a name for a half. So in this case, yes, 4 is half of 8, so we would draw a triangle around that. Can you find any others that show halves? All right, well, 5 6 would not be a half because 5 is not half of 6. 3 fourths. 3 is not half of 4, so that's not showing a half. But 3 6 does because 3 is half of 6. All right, so those are the only 2 that we can put a triangle around. Okay, very, very good. Now, this next part, we need to know how to figure out the wholes and the halves just like we did so that we can compare fractions. Okay, so looking here at number 1, they want us to do greater than, less than, or equal to. So let's take a look. We have 3 fourths. Well, what do we know about a whole? 1. We want to use the same number here. What would be a whole using fourths? I'm going to cross that out, and I know it would be 4 fourths, right? 4 fourths would make 1 whole because I want to keep this bottom number the same. So now we can compare 3 fourths. Is that greater than? equal to or less than 4/4? Well, it is less than. Isn't that pretty easy? Let's do another one. Let's do number 3. 7/8. Well, what do we know about a half? 1/2 of 8ths would be 4/8. Because remember, we want to compare like denominators. So I chose 8. Half of 8ths, something divided by 8ths, would be 4/8. So let's compare 7/8 and 4/8. 7/8 would be greater than 4/8. All right, you go ahead and try to do the rest to number 11. Just do to number 11, pause the video, and then come back and we will check our answers. Okay, let's check number 4. We know we're dealing with a half of 6ths. So a half of something divided into 6ths would be 3/6. So now we can compare 5/6 is greater than 3/6. We have 4/3 and 1. Well, remember we want to keep the thirds. 1 whole of thirds would be 3/3. So we have 4/3 and 3/3. 4/3 would be greater. We know about halves. Half of something divided into 7ths. Well, we don't really know exactly. We could say 3.5, or we could look at it a different way. We could say, we know that 3/7 is less than half. So, let me find my pen. Okay, so 3/7 is less than a half because half of 7 is 3.5. Okay. How about 4/8? Oh, well, look at that. We have 4/8. That is a half. And then we're comparing it to another half. So that one would be equals. Okay, 3/6. Or, let's change this one to 6/6. That would be less than. 9/9 and 1 is equal. 4/10 and 1/2. What is 1/2 of 10ths? It would be 5/10, so that would be less than. And then we have 5/10 and 4/8. Ooh, that's a tricky one, but not really. Because what do we know about this? We know 5 is half of 10, so this is a half. And 4/8, 4 is half of 8, so that's also a half, so that's equal to. Okay, so now for the bottom, you're just going to write the fractions from the least to the greatest. And what they do is they have a half here in the middle for you to look at. What do you know about halves? It means the top number has to be half of the bottom number for it to land right on the half mark. Okay, so let's take a look at this one here. We have 3/4. Well, because half is our marker, I'm going to put right here what half would be. Okay, half of 3/4 would be 2/4. That 3/4 is greater than that. So we would put 3/4 right there. Okay, let me get rid of this. All right, so now I'm going to change my color. 1/2, we're going to compare this one here now, eighths, because we're going to look at this one. So half of anything that's divided by eighths would be 4/8. So now we have 3/8 that's less than 4/8, which would be half. So we would put 3/8 here. And there you go. It goes 3/8, 1/2, and 3/4 is from least to greatest. All right, so you go ahead and do 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17. And then pause the video first, do it, and then come back. We'll check. Okay, let's focus on number 13, 1/2. So this is our middle number. Well, what's half of anything divided by 6 would be 3/6. So this 2 is less than the 3. So this would go right here before it's least. I mean, it's less than a half. So we're going to put that here. We're going to double check over here. Half of anything divided into tenths would be 5/10. This number is greater than half. So it is greater than 5. So 7/10 goes right there. Nope, the page does not want to get small. All right, here we go. Okay, our half is our middle number. Ooh, do you see something? I see something really easy to see. This right here, 3/3 is 1/2. That is greater than a half, so we know 3/3 goes right there. So 1/4 would go right to the left. That's because it's less than a half. Because half of fourths would be 2/4. Okay. So then I'm just going to give you the answers for the rest. So for number 15, you would have 1/4, then 1/2, 5/5. Number 16, 3/8, 1/2, and then 4/6. And then for 17, 2/8, 1/2, and 3/4. So basically, if you get stuck, just go all the way back up to the top again. Think about what makes a whole. How many pieces make a whole? Cut that in half for what names a half of the item that is being partitioned. Okay, and that's going to help you compare those numbers that don't have the same denominator. All right, so your job now is to complete the back of this work page, page 302, and also your homework page, just the front, page 219 out of your reviews book. And then take a photo of those and turn them in. All right, till next time.